Krittika Nakshatra, operational style, options versus procedures. Some people thrive in flexibility, exploring multiple ways to accomplish a goal, while others prefer structured step-by-step methods to ensure efficiency and control. Krittika Nakshatra, known for its sharp intellect, disciplined nature, and ability to refine and perfect, often leans towards structured execution. However, whether they operate with an options-based mindset, preferring flexibility and adaptability, or a procedures-based mindset, favoring systematic and structured execution, depends on planetary placements. Rahu and Mars in the 3rd and 6th houses encourage flexibility, while Mercury and Saturn in the 6th and 10th houses promote structure and discipline. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Critica, their operational style is highly options-driven. They thrive in fast-moving, high-risk environments, preferring to explore unconventional methods rather than follow a fixed plan. They adapt quickly, excel in competitive industries, and often experiment with multiple approaches before settling on one. While this gives them an innovative edge, it can also make them scattered, restless, or prone to abandoning tasks before refining them fully, something that clashes with Kritika's natural inclination toward precision and mastery. If Rahu is in the 6th house, they still prefer options, but in a more calculated, problem-solving way. They constantly adjust their strategies in work and health, experimenting until they find the most efficient system. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Critica, they operate in high-energy, fast-action mode, thriving in dynamic, hands-on environments. Their approach to work is direct, forceful, and instinct-driven, preferring immediate action over excessive planning. They love testing limits, pushing boundaries, and seeing what works through direct engagement. However, this can sometimes clash with Kritika's need for refinement, making them act too quickly rather than perfecting their method. If Mars moves to the 6th house, their operational style becomes more disciplined, efficient, and endurance-based. They still like action, but now they follow structured routines to maintain long-term efficiency. If Mercury is in the 6th house in Critica, their operational style leans heavily toward procedures. They prefer organized workflows, detailed plans, and a systematic approach to problem solving. Their ability to analyze and structure work processes makes them highly effective in technical, administrative, or data-driven professions. Unlike Rahu's ever-changing approach, Mercury in this position seeks clarity and refinement through methodical execution, ensuring that each step follows a logical sequence. If Saturn is in the 10th house in Critica, their entire work style is procedure-driven, structured, and long-term focused. They thrive in hierarchical, disciplined environments where rules, order, and efficiency define success. They dislike chaotic or unstructured work and excel when given clear guidelines, responsibilities, and leadership roles. While this complements Kritika's desire for mastery, it can also make them rigid, resistant to new methods, and slow to adapt to sudden changes. Kritika's natural sharpness and refinement give it the potential to function in both structured and flexible environments, but planetary placements determine whether they thrive in adaptive, multi-approach strategies or in precise, methodical execution. The key is for Critica natives to balance their natural ability to perfect things with the openness to explore different methods when needed. Krittika Nakshatra, views, general or specific. Some people see the bigger picture, focusing on broad patterns and overarching themes, while others zoom in on precise details, breaking things down with sharp accuracy. Krittika Nakshatra, known for its clarity, precision, and ability to refine knowledge, naturally possesses a discerning mind. However, whether they lean toward generalized, big-picture thinking or detail-oriented, specific analysis depends on planetary placements. Jupiter in the 1st and 9th houses encourages a broad, conceptual approach, while Mercury and Ketu in the 5th house sharpen their focus on details. If Jupiter is in the 1st house in Critica, their thinking is broad and general, meaning they see overarching principles, long-term visions, and large-scale patterns, rather than getting caught in specifics. They prefer to understand the essence of a subject, rather than focus on minor details. Their mind is naturally expansive, philosophical, and strategic, but this can sometimes make them overlook fine details or struggle with precision-based work. If Jupiter is in the ninth house, their big picture thinking expands even further, making them deeply philosophical, abstract, and drawn to wisdom traditions, law, and universal truths, rather than the step-by-step workings of a concept. If Mercury is in the fifth house in Critica, their thinking is highly specific, detail-focused, and intellectually sharp. They break down complex ideas into small, digestible parts, making them excellent at analysis, technical learning, and refining knowledge to its purest form. Unlike Jupiter's broad outlook, Mercury in this position seeks exact definitions, logical structures, and technical mastery, excelling in fields that require precision and structured thought. However, they may miss the bigger picture or struggle with abstract, conceptual ideas if they get too caught up in details. If K2 is in the fifth house in Critica, their perspective is both highly specific and deeply intuitive. They may notice hidden patterns, underlying truths, and abstract details that others overlook. However, their understanding is not always linear, meaning they grasp information in fragments, symbols, or flashes of insight rather than through structured learning. Their mind naturally cuts away unnecessary information, focusing only on what is essential. But this can sometimes lead them to overlook broader implications or struggle with conventional education methods. Critica's razor-sharp intelligence and ability to refine knowledge make it highly effective in both broad and detail-focused thinking. But planetary placements determine whether they thrive in conceptual, strategic insights or precise, technical mastery. The key for Critica natives is to balance their natural clarity with an awareness of when to zoom out for broader understanding and when to sharpen their focus on details that matter. Krittika Nakshatra, work preferences, together, proximity, or solo. Some people thrive in team environments, constantly collaborating and engaging with others, while others prefer to work independently, either in close proximity to a group or in complete solitude. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, self-sufficiency, and ability to refine and perfect, often prefers structured and disciplined work styles. But whether they function best in collaboration, together, near others but independently, proximity, or entirely alone, solo, depends on planetary placements. Venus, Mercury, and Ketu in the 3rd, 6th, and 10th houses influence whether they prefer direct teamwork, partial engagement, or complete independence in their work environment. If Venus is in the 3rd house in Critica, they prefer working together, excelling in team-oriented professions where communication, diplomacy, and creative input are valued. They are drawn to media, marketing, fashion, or any work that requires collaboration and aesthetic refinement. They enjoy harmonious interactions and the exchange of ideas, making them great in partnership-driven professions. However, if Venus is in the 10th house, they still function well in team settings, but prefer leadership roles, ensuring that their authority and expertise are recognized within the group, rather than just blending in. If Mercury is in the 6th house in Critica, they prefer a proximity-based work environment where they can engage in discussions but still work independently on detailed tasks. They enjoy jobs that involve analysis, writing, research, and problem solving, where they can work alone, yet stay mentally engaged with colleagues through structured communication. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, they become even more strategic in their professional interactions, often working closely with teams, but maintaining their autonomy in decision-making and execution. If K2 is in the 6th house in Critica, they prefer working solo, excelling in self-driven professions where they can operate on their own terms without excessive supervision or group reliance. They are drawn to research, spiritual work, or specialized fields that require deep focus and detachment from workplace politics. If K2 is in the 10th house, this preference for solo work becomes even more pronounced. They may rise to high positions, but remain emotionally detached from corporate environments, often feeling more at ease in independent consulting, freelancing, or behind-the-scenes roles, rather than traditional office settings. Krittika Nakshatra's sharp focus and perfectionist tendencies allow them to excel in structured environments, but planetary placements determine whether they thrive in direct teamwork, independent work within a group, or complete solitude. Learning to balance their need for control with the benefits of collaboration helps them maximize their leadership potential and professional success. Krittika Nakshatra, cognitive subconscious patterns, audio, visual, and kinesthetic. Some people move through life with sharp awareness, cutting through illusions and distractions with precision. They don't just observe, they analyze, refine, and perfect. Krittika Nakshatra isn't about passive experience. It's about discerning truth, sharpening skills, and mastering control. Their subconscious processing is wired for selection and refinement, meaning they don't just absorb information, they filter it, break it down, and extract only what is useful. If we break it down through NLP cognitive styles, audio, visual, and kinesthetic, we can see exactly how they engage with their environment, process learning, and interact with the world. If their mind is visually dominant, they don't just see details. They analyze them with sharp precision, seeking clarity and structure in every image they process. If the sun is in the first house in Critica, they rely on mental imagery of strength, leadership, and authority to guide their confidence. They picture themselves as powerful and unshakable, using visual cues to assert dominance and maintain control. However, if the sun is in the seventh house, their visual processing shifts outward. They focus on how others perceive them, analyzing facial expressions, body language, and visual power dynamics in relationships and partnerships. If Mercury is in the third house in Critica, their auditory processing is sharp, fast, and highly structured. They are quick-witted, mentally agile, and highly analytical in speech. They process spoken words as commands, breaking down information into logical sequences, and often correcting or refining what they hear before responding. If Mercury is in the ninth house, their auditory processing expands beyond logic. They listen for deeper meanings in philosophy, abstract thought, and belief systems, absorbing knowledge through lectures, sacred texts, and discussions about universal truths. If Mars is in the sixth house in Critica, their kinesthetic processing is disciplined, action-oriented, and methodical. They don't just react, they train themselves for mastery, developing endurance and control over their body and mind. They learn best by doing, practicing, and applying effort repetitively until perfection is achieved. If Mars is in the 12th house, however, their kinesthetic energy becomes more internalized. They act through subconscious instinct, spiritual discipline, or hidden mastery, meaning their physical expression of energy is often controlled, refined, or even concealed from the outside world. Critica's core cognitive style is one of precision and refinement, whether through visual analysis, structured speech, or disciplined physical action. They don't simply process information, they perfect it. Their greatest strength lies in their ability to cut through distractions and focus on what truly matters, ensuring that every thought, word, and movement aligns with mastery, clarity, and purpose. Krittika Nakshatra, motivation direction. Some people move through life with a sharp sense of purpose, cutting through distractions and uncertainty with precision. They don't act on impulse. They act with intention, clarity, and a deep sense of refinement. Krittika Nakshatra isn't about indulgence or chasing temporary desires. It's about mastery, purification, and controlled ambition. Their motivation isn't scattered. It is focused, deliberate, and fueled by an inner fire that refuses to accept mediocrity. Whether they are internally motivated, self-driven, or externally motivated, reacting to outside forces, depends on planetary placements within Critica, shaping how they engage with goals, discipline, and achievement. If the sun is in the first house in Critica, their motivation is purely internal, meaning they move through life with an innate sense of self-assurance and purpose. They do not seek validation from others. They act because they know their path and trust their ability to lead. Their self-discipline and hunger for personal excellence drive them forward, ensuring they always hold themselves to the highest standard. But if the sun is in the seventh house, motivation becomes externally activated. They measure success by how others perceive them, constantly refining their public image, relationships, and leadership influence. Their drive comes from recognition, social standing, and a desire to be seen as an authority figure. If Mars is in the third house in Critica, their motivation is aggressively self-initiated. They don't wait for permission. They conquer challenges through sheer willpower and relentless effort. They are fueled by competition, personal victories, and intellectual dominance, always needing a new challenge to sharpen their skills. However, if Mars is in the 10th house, motivation shifts outward. They channel their fiery energy into career success, professional dominance, and long-term ambition. Their drive is no longer just about personal achievement. It is about proving their strength in leadership roles and leaving a legacy through disciplined effort. If Rahu is in the 6th house in Critica, motivation is externally driven by obstacles, enemies, and competition. They thrive in high-pressure environments, pushing themselves harder when faced with resistance. Every challenge fuels their ambition, making them highly strategic, tactical, and willing to take risks others fear. But if Rahu is in the 12th house, their motivation becomes more abstract, seeking power through secrecy, spiritual mastery, or hidden knowledge. They may feel driven by an unseen karmic force, pushing them toward esoteric wisdom, hidden ambitions, or unconventional paths to success. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Critica, motivation becomes internally structured and deeply tied to emotional security. They work not for external rewards, but to build something lasting, something unshakable within themselves. Their drive comes from a need for stability, self-reliance, and the mastery of their own emotions and personal foundations. But if Saturn is in the 10th house, motivation shifts toward external achievements, structured career success, and long-term legacy building. They are relentless in their pursuit of perfection and will outwork anyone to reach the top, ensuring that their status, reputation, and influence remain unchallenged. Krittika Nakshatra is fueled by a need to refine, purify, and master their domain, whether through self-discipline, intellectual rigor, strategic ambition, or controlled power. They never act without reason. Their motivation is not about fleeting success. It is about perfecting their craft, eliminating weaknesses, and becoming the best version of themselves, whether through internal mastery or external recognition. Krittika Nakshatra attention direction, self or others. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to be completely absorbed in their own inner world, while others are always tuned into what's happening around them? In Krittika Nakshatra, the way attention is directed, whether focused on self or others, can reveal a lot about how one processes information and interacts with the world. Critica, with its razor-sharp precision and drive for perfection, can direct its attention inward to build a formidable inner strength, or outward to dominate social interactions. If the sun is placed in the 1st house in Critica, their attention is naturally self-focused. They're laser-sharp about who they are and what they want to achieve, constantly refining their personal identity and striving for excellence in every action. In this configuration, they rarely rely on external validation because they're driven by an intrinsic need to perfect themselves and establish their own identity. However, when the sun shifts to the 7th house, the focus pivots to others. These individuals become keenly aware of social dynamics and the impressions they make on those around them, using interpersonal feedback as a gauge for success. If Mercury is in the 1st house in Critica, attention is oriented towards self-expression and personal analysis. Their thoughts are finely tuned, and they pay close attention to their internal dialogue and immediate impressions, ensuring that every word and idea reflects their high standards. Yet, if Mercury is in the 7th house, their attention shifts outward, driving them to engage actively with others, refine ideas through conversation, and adjust their approach based on the reactions and perspectives of those they interact with. When Venus occupies the 1st house in Critica, their attention gravitates inward towards cultivating personal aesthetics, style, and emotional self-worth. They are intensely self-aware, constantly evaluating how they can improve their own image and presence. On the other hand, With Venus in the seventh house, these individuals focus on how their charm and beauty affect their relationships. They become very attuned to the expectations, needs, and feedback of others, using social harmony as a mirror for personal refinement. If Saturn is placed in the first house in Critica, the natural tendency is to build self-discipline and structure from within. They meticulously monitor their own behavior and performance, setting strict internal standards and valuing self-reliance above all. However, when Saturn is in the seventh house, their attention shifts toward external structures, working hard to meet societal expectations, maintain professionalism, and uphold responsibilities in relationships. In this setup, their self-worth is often measured by how well they conform to or manage external systems. Ultimately, Krittika Nakshatra's power lies in its ability to balance self-focused intensity with an awareness of others. Whether their attention is turned inward for personal refinement or outward to influence and lead, this duality helps them achieve the perfection they so deeply value. Mastering this balance is key to harnessing the full potential of Kritika's precise, transformative energy. Krittika Nakshatra, understanding chunk size, big or little. Some people process life by grasping the entire picture at once, focusing on overarching patterns, while others break things down into small, manageable steps, examining details before seeing the whole. Krittika Nakshatra, known for its sharp intellect, refinement, and precision, is naturally inclined towards structured processing. But whether they prefer big-picture thinking, macro, or detail-oriented thinking, micro, depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and Mercury in the first, fifth, and ninth houses influence whether they focus on broad themes or specific intricacies. If Jupiter is in the first house in Critica, their understanding is large chunk-oriented, meaning they focus on bigger visions, long-term strategies, and overarching life philosophies. They don't get lost in the details. Instead, they prefer to extract core lessons and general themes rather than analyze specifics. They thrive when discussing universal truths, higher learning, and long-term impact, sometimes overlooking smaller steps along the way. If Jupiter moves to the ninth house, this macro thinking expands into philosophy, law, and belief systems, making them deeply intellectual, abstract, and wisdom-seeking, often thinking in broad, interconnected ways rather than sequential logic. If Mercury is in the fifth house in Critica, their understanding becomes micro-focused, meaning they prefer breaking things down, analyzing small details, and refining concepts step by step. They thrive in fields requiring sharp mental processing, meticulous organization, and a strong grasp of specifics, such as strategy, analytics, and creative problem-solving. Unlike Jupiter, which generalizes, Mercury here wants exact definitions, structured steps, and precise execution. If Mercury moves to the ninth house, their thinking expands, shifting toward bigger picture perspectives, but they may still analyze belief systems and ideologies with sharp attention to detail, ensuring clarity before fully committing to a worldview. If Ketu is in the first house in Critica, their understanding of life is paradoxically macro yet detached. They see patterns intuitively without needing to analyze them, often absorbing universal truths instinctively rather than logically. However, if Ketu is in the fifth house, their thinking becomes highly detail-oriented but non-linear, meaning they can spot hidden patterns, abstract symbols, and complex connections that others miss, though they may struggle to articulate their insights in a structured way. Krittika Nakshatra's sharp, discerning mind naturally thrives in analysis, precision, and refinement, but planetary placements determine whether they process life through broad conceptual understanding or focused attention to details. Their greatest strength lies in balancing both perspectives, knowing when to focus on the grand vision and when to sharpen their skills through detailed mastery. Krittika Nakshatra, internal or external. Some people trust their own instincts and inner judgment, making decisions based on what they believe to be right, while others seek validation from external sources, measuring success through feedback, societal norms, or authority figures. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, strong will, and ability to refine and perfect, has a natural inclination towards self-assurance and internal decision-making. But whether they are internally referenced, self-driven, or externally referenced, seeking validation from others, depends on planetary placements. Jupiter, Moon, Venus, and Saturn in the 4th and 10th houses shape how they derive confidence, authority, and purpose. If Jupiter is in the 4th house in Critica, their frame of reference is deeply internal, meaning they trust their own wisdom, life lessons, and moral compass over external validation. They feel secure in their inner beliefs, knowledge, and personal philosophies, making them independent thinkers who rarely seek approval from others. However, if Jupiter is in the 10th house, their reference frame shifts externally. They start measuring success through public achievements, social status, and recognition from authority figures. While they may still have strong personal convictions, they become more concerned with how their contributions are perceived by society. If the Moon is in the 4th house in Critica, their reference frame is internal and emotionally driven. They trust their feelings, intuition, and subconscious memory of past experiences to guide their decisions. They are deeply connected to their emotional world and personal sense of comfort, meaning they don't easily shift based on external pressures. However, if the Moon is in the 10th house, their attention shifts to external feedback, making them more aware of how their emotions and actions are interpreted by the public, superiors, or their professional circle. They may seek reassurance from authority figures or social standing to feel validated. If Venus is in the 4th house in Critica, their sense of validation is self-contained, meaning they measure their worth based on how fulfilled they feel in their personal life, relationships, and creative pursuits. They prioritize inner harmony and emotional security over social recognition. However, if Venus is in the 10th house, they become externally referenced, valuing admiration, reputation, and how their charm or skills are received in public spaces. They thrive on recognition in professional or social circles, often basing decisions on how they will be perceived rather than purely on internal values. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Critica, their sense of self is rooted in internal discipline, structure, and a strong personal moral code. They don't seek external validation as much as they seek inner mastery, self-discipline, and endurance. Their reference frame is built through hardship and personal experience rather than external praise. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, they become externally conditioned, meaning they measure their worth through career status, professional hierarchy, and recognition from societal institutions. They feel the need to prove themselves in the external world to validate their achievements. Critica's sharp and discerning mind naturally leans toward an internal reference, trusting its own reasoning, logic, and ability to refine and perfect. However, planetary placements determine whether they stand firm in their self-belief or look to external validation for direction. Mastering this balance ensures they can refine their talents without being overly influenced by societal expectations, allowing them to sharpen their wisdom while still thriving in the world around them. Krittika Nakshatra, action preference, proactive or reactive. Some people initiate action, taking control of situations before anyone else has made a move, while others wait, observe, and respond strategically based on circumstances. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, strong discernment, and ability to refine and execute, has a natural inclination toward direct and decisive action, but whether they are proactive, self-initiating, or reactive, responding to external triggers, depends on planetary placements. Mars, Mercury, and Rahu in the 3rd, 5th, and 10th houses shape whether they charge ahead or wait for the right moment to act. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Critica, their action preference is highly proactive. They take initiative in conversations, challenges, and personal ambitions, pushing forward with confidence and a sense of urgency. They don't wait for instructions. They lead the way, assert their dominance, and set the pace for others. This placement complements Kritika's natural leadership energy, but it can also lead to overaggression, impatience, or acting before fully considering the consequences. If Mars is in the 10th house, their proactive energy becomes career-driven, making them forceful, ambitious, and unwilling to take a passive role in professional settings. They may excel in leadership, but struggle with delegation, as they prefer to take charge rather than wait for others to act. If Mercury is in the fifth house in Critica, their approach to action is more reactive and intellectually driven. They don't immediately jump into situations, but instead analyze patterns, consider different angles, and respond accordingly. Their decisions are based on mental agility rather than sheer willpower, making them highly adaptable but sometimes hesitant to act without sufficient data. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their reactive approach becomes strategic in professional and public settings. They prefer to observe workplace dynamics, adjust to social or business trends, and make calculated moves rather than impulsive ones. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Critica, their action preference becomes erratic and unpredictable, leaning toward hyperproactivity in communication, risk-taking, and high-energy pursuits. They thrive in competitive environments where they must constantly stay ahead, but their impulsivity can sometimes work against them, leading them to take unnecessary risks. If Rahu moves to the 10th house, their action preference shifts toward reactivity in career and public life. They are driven by external expectations, societal trends, and the pressure to prove themselves, meaning they often make bold career moves in response to external influences, rather than out of pure internal drive. Krittika Nakshatra naturally leans toward direct, purposeful action, but planetary influences determine whether they take control immediately or wait for the right moment to respond. Those with proactive tendencies dominate and initiate, while those with reactive tendencies master the art of strategic response. The key for Critica is to balance its sharp decisiveness with the patience to refine action into mastery rather than impulsivity. Krittika Nakshatra, experience, association versus dissociation. Some people fully immerse themselves in every experience, feeling events deeply and personally, while others step back, analyze, and detach from situations, maintaining an objective perspective. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp discernment, discipline, and ability to refine knowledge, naturally processes life with precision, but whether they deeply engage association or detach for analysis. Dissociation depends on planetary placements. Mercury and Jupiter in the 4th, 5th, and 10th houses influence how they experience emotions, relationships, and events, either as active participants or distant observers. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Critica, their experience is highly associated, meaning they feel mentally and emotionally immersed in their personal life, family, and inner world. They process events through active thoughts, deep conversations, and intellectual engagement, making them highly involved in understanding their own emotions and those of others. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, they take on a dissociated approach to professional life, preferring to analyze work, leadership, and public standing from a strategic distance rather than through personal emotional investment. If Jupiter is in the 5th house in Critica, their experience remains deeply associated, particularly in areas of learning, creativity, and relationships. They become emotionally involved in their ideas, teachings, and romantic life, seeing themselves as part of the larger journey of growth and wisdom. They process life through grand experiences rather than detached observation. However, if Jupiter moves to the 10th house, their approach to experience becomes more dissociated, as they focus on bigger systems, career progression, and long-term influence rather than personal involvement in the moment. They may take a more objective, strategic role in their professional life, ensuring decisions are made based on logic rather than personal emotions. If Ketu is in the 4th house in Critica, their experience of life is strongly dissociated, especially in emotional and personal matters. They feel disconnected from home, roots, and past experiences, often preferring to observe rather than fully engage in deep emotional bonds. If Ketu moves to the 5th house, this dissociation extends to creativity, romance, and self-expression, where they may detach from pleasure, emotional depth, or traditional ways of experiencing love and joy, processing events in a more spiritual or detached manner. Krittika Nakshatra's sharp intellect and strong discernment allow it to switch between deep emotional involvement and distant logical analysis, depending on planetary placements. While association helps them engage deeply and refine their personal experiences, dissociation enables them to analyze, strategize, and maintain clarity in decision making. Mastering this balance ensures that they neither lose themselves in emotional intensity nor become too distant to experience life fully. Krittika Nakshatra: approach versus mismatching. Some people align with patterns, seeking similarities and reinforcing established structures, while others question norms, challenge traditions, and focus on what is different or missing. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, precision, and transformative power, can either match existing systems to refine them or break them apart to create something stronger. Whether they lean toward matching, seeking alignment, or mismatching, focusing on differences and disruption, depends on planetary placements. Saturn and Rahu in the 3rd and 6th houses influence whether they follow structure or challenge conventions in communication, work, and problem solving. If Saturn is in the 3rd house in Critica, their approach is matching oriented, meaning they prefer order, structure, and logical consistency in their communication, learning, and social interactions. They align with proven systems, follow traditional knowledge, and respect disciplined approaches to skill building. They work best when there is a clear set of guidelines or a structured path forward, ensuring stability and efficiency. However, if Saturn is in the 6th house, their matching tendency becomes even stronger in work ethics, discipline, and professional execution. They prefer routine, hierarchy, and step-by-step progress, ensuring that everything follows an established structure. The downside? They may resist innovation or struggle with flexibility in rapidly changing environments. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Critica, their approach becomes highly mismatching. They challenge communication norms, break away from traditional methods of learning, and prefer unconventional strategies. They question established authority in knowledge and prefer bold, independent thinking. Unlike Saturn, which follows rules, Rahu creates its own path, making them charismatic yet disruptive, innovative yet unpredictable. If Rahu moves to the 6th house, mismatching becomes even more pronounced in work, competition, and problem solving. They refuse to conform to traditional workplace structures, prefer alternative methods to achieve success, and challenge authority figures. Their ability to spot flaws in existing systems allows them to excel, but their rebellious nature can also create workplace conflicts. Kritika's natural ability to refine and perfect systems allows it to function in both matching and mismatching modes, depending on planetary influences. Saturn reinforces stability, order, and reliability, while Rahu drives disruption, reinvention, and rebellion. The key is knowing when to refine what exists and when to break away to create something better, ensuring that Kritika's transformative power leads to mastery rather than unnecessary resistance. Krittika Nakshatra: time experience, in time versus through. Some people live completely in the moment, fully immersed in their actions and emotions, while others track time as a structured sequence, seeing the past, present, and future as interconnected steps. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, discipline, and ability to refine and master, tends to engage with time through structured processes. But whether they are in time, focused on the present, or through time, aware of the long-term trajectory, depends on planetary placements. Saturn and Jupiter in the 1st, 7th house axis influence in-time perception, while their placements in the 4th, 10th axis shape a through-time approach. If Saturn is in the 1st house in Critica, their time experience is in time, slow, and deeply rooted in the present moment. They are highly aware of their personal growth, responsibilities, and immediate challenges, making them methodical in how they engage with life. They don't dwell on the past or overly strategize for the future. They focus on mastering the moment, ensuring every action is refined and purposeful. However, if Saturn is in the 7th house, their in-time awareness shifts toward relationships, meaning they are fully engaged in partnerships, experiencing social and professional connections as they unfold. They may be deeply loyal in relationships, but struggle with stepping back to see long-term consequences. If Jupiter is in the fourth house in Critica, their time experience becomes through time, focused on long-term emotional security, family legacy, and karmic patterns. They process life with a broader awareness of how the past shapes the present and how today's choices affect the future. This makes them highly reflective, wise, and cautious in emotional decisions, ensuring that they maintain stability and uphold traditions. However, if Jupiter moves to the 10th house, their through-time perspective expands toward career, public standing, and legacy. They focus on structuring their professional journey to create lasting influence, carefully considering each step in their long-term plan. If Rahu is in the first house in Critica, their time experience is hyper in time, reactive, and focused on personal advancement. They tend to act first and think later, prioritizing immediate opportunities over structured long-term plans. They may struggle with seeing the consequences of their actions, preferring to live in the thrill of the now. If Rahu moves to the 7th house, their focus shifts toward relationships and social interactions, meaning they may become obsessed with how others perceive them in the moment, seeking constant engagement while neglecting the bigger picture. If Ketu is in the 4th house in Critica, their time experience is deeply through time, but detached from the present. They process life through ancestral wisdom, subconscious memories, and karmic awareness, often feeling like they are living through cycles of events beyond their control. Their decisions are based on intuitive knowledge rather than logical sequencing. If Ketu moves to the 10th house, their through-time focus applies to career and status. They may achieve great professional success, but feel emotionally detached from it, seeing work as a karmic responsibility rather than a personal ambition. Krittika Nakshatra naturally leans towards structured thinking and refinement, but planetary influences determine whether they engage fully in the present moment or track their life across time. Mastering this balance allows them to hone their sharp intellect while ensuring that their actions align with both immediate needs and long-term success. Krittika Nakshatra, primary interest motivation, people, activities, places, or things. Some people find motivation in relationships and social dynamics, while others are fueled by constant movement, ambitious pursuits, or a deep connection to objects and knowledge. Krittika Nakshatra, with its sharp intellect, structured mindset, and commitment to refinement, is naturally driven by precision and mastery, but whether they are primarily motivated by people, activities, places, or things depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and the Moon influence social motivation, people. Mars drives action-oriented focus, activities. Mercury directs curiosity toward places. And Saturn and Rahu determine material or structural motivations, things. If Jupiter is in the 7th house in Critica, their primary motivation comes from people, particularly through guidance, teaching, and leadership in relationships. They seek wisdom from mentors, partners, and authority figures, and their personal growth is often tied to who they associate with and how they influence others. However, if the Moon is in the 1st house, their motivation from people is emotionally personal. They are driven by deep, meaningful relationships that shape their identity and provide emotional security. Their self-perception is strongly influenced by how others respond to them, making them highly attuned to social and familial bonds. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Critica, their primary motivation is activity. They thrive on challenges, dynamic interactions, and constant movement. They need to be engaged in physical or intellectual battles, where their competitive edge and sharp instincts can shine. Unlike those who find fulfillment in relationships or stability, they are fueled by action, problem solving, and pushing their limits. However, if Mars moves to the 6th house, their action-based motivation becomes more structured, directed toward long-term endurance in work, service, and personal discipline. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Critica, their motivation is deeply tied to places, specifically the need for intellectual stimulation, movement, and adaptability within different environments. They often seek new experiences through travel, relocation, or shifting their home or workspace as they thrive on change and fresh perspectives. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, their motivation for places expands toward professional environments, meaning they are drawn to work that allows them to interact with different regions, industries, or knowledge fields. If Saturn is in the 6th house in Critica, their primary motivation is things, specifically structure, mastery, and material stability. They thrive in building something long-lasting, ensuring efficiency, and accumulating expertise in a specialized field. They are not easily distracted by emotions or people. Instead, they seek discipline, order, and practical success. If Rahu is in the 10th house, their material motivation becomes status-driven, fueled by ambition, unconventional success, and the pursuit of symbols of power. They are drawn to rare, prestigious, or high-status achievements, constantly chasing something that will cement their influence in the external world. Krittika Nakshatra's sharp focus and drive for refinement ensure that whatever motivates them, they pursue it with discipline and mastery. Whether their passion is for people, action, places, or tangible success, they approach it with precision, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to perfection.